Hello and welcome. I'm Leanne Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. The world responds to Trump's long-awaited tariffs. Canadians fight back. Mark Carney announces a 25% tax on imported US vehicles. And at least 6 people are dead and over 200,000 without power after tornadoes rage across the US. Now to our top story, and the whole world is talking about President Trump's favorite word, tariffs. Yes, after months of threats, Trump finally unveiled his plan to make America wealthy again, with all eyes on his tariff table. Let's take a look.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day, waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. But such horrendous imbalances have devastated our industrial base and put our national security at risk. I don't blame these other countries at all for this calamity. I blame former presidents and past leaders who weren't doing their job. They let it happen, and they let it happen to an extent that nobody can even believe. China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes.
Let's discuss that moment and all of today's news stories with Al Arabiya website editor Joanne Surya and media strategist and former editor-in-chief Michael Jabri Pickett. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for joining me. So there we are, Donald Trump last night in the Rose Garden. We saw him with this table. Quite a moment in history. How do you both feel about what we just saw?
Ladies first.
Sure. It's a bit confusing, I think, like everyone has been saying. It's all new. We're still trying to figure out what's going to happen, where this is headed. We've seen all different types of reactions from all over the world, and it's just a matter of waiting at this point.
You know, yesterday, just after it happened, I would have thought there were 3 words that best explained what was happening. One was countermeasures, another was chaos, and the third probably would have been regrettable. Those were the ones that I saw the most. Now, almost 24 hours later, I think it's 2 other words, trade, war, and I would add another one, which is recession. I think those are trade wars. I think we're going to be in the midst of that, and I think that there's a real chance now that there could be a recession coming at some point in 2025.
And I feel like a lot of people think there's a lot more questions than there are answers at this crossroads after this announcement. But Joanne, Trump's approval rating has fallen to 43%, the lowest since his return to office. Could these tariffs actually be the undoing of his presidency? He says he's going to make America wealthy again and great again. But what do you think about the repercussions?
So just to be clear, that poll was before these tariffs were announced. So I think that just depends, honestly, at this point. If these tariffs do actually do what Trump is saying the goal is, that could be a win for Trump and for his administration. But if people are going to wait it out, like they're being told, just wait it out. It's bad at first, then it'll get better. But then they end up paying a lot more when they go to the grocery store or at the pump or anything like that. I think his approval rating will be even hit worse.
And you've got family in the US. You know, what have they been saying to you? You over here. What's the kind of feeling amongst everyone?
I think anxiety is the word to use there. Everyone's anxious. Nobody knows where this is headed. Especially, I'm talking from a consumer point of view. If I'm talking about my family, so they're, basic American consumers, and anytime things become more expensive, that affects people, affects families, affects individuals, even some family friends that are in business. They said that they voted for Trump because of business and in hopes that it would improve their businesses, and it's actually having a negative impact on them so far.
And Michael, I just wanted to have a talk about the stock markets. I mean, if we talk about the US market, it opened significantly lower this morning. We saw the tech-heavy NASDAQ that was down over 5%. Listen, the European market's also lower, but not to the extent. Do you think we could see Trump attempting to U-turn, to claw back support? Do you think he's got a bit of buyer's remorse, maybe?
I don't think so. I think he is, I heard someone explain quite basically that Trump likes tariffs. He believes in them. And J.D. Vance has been out speaking along the similar lines. He is very much in favor, trying to get the American public to understand that there is going to be some short-term pain, but for long-term gain. I don't think Trump is going to be wanting to claw anything back. I think he wants this. He may want to use it as a bit of a foreign policy tool, which tariffs traditionally are not used as. But I think he's wanting to have these conversations with countries. But I also think that he doesn't want the tariffs to go anywhere. He believes in them and he wants them.
Well, actually, earlier on, I spoke to former Trump chair Rob Artlett, who believed President Trump knows exactly what he's doing. Take a listen.
He just wants an even playing field. When there is a country, as an example, that's got a 200% tariff on their rice that's coming into America, that's not really fair. So at the end of the day, President Trump is only placing these tariffs on countries that are not being fair to the American citizens as it relates to their exports that are coming into this country. This actually could be part of his tremendous legacy because that's exactly what he believes, and I believe President Trump. Again, he is a very successful businessman, and he's bringing his business experience to the White House.
So there we are. That was Rob Artlett. And he basically said to me, listen, this is going to be Trump's legacy, which I thought was really interesting. But today, Trump himself came out and he said on his social media platform in capital letters, the operation is over, the patient has lived and it's healing. And the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, said, trust in President Trump. So really, Joanne, is this Republican Party watertight, and no matter what happens, they're going to be supporting this?
I think so, yes. So that's something known about the Republican Party, is that they stick together, they stand behind each other no matter what, and we've seen that with Trump and his administration, and also with Trump, he seems to surround himself with people who are loyal to him, and we've seen that especially with this administration compared to his last term. So yes, I would say yes to that question.
I would actually counter that. I think that when you're talking about India, when you're talking about China, Japan, South Korea, some of the countries in Asia that were hit hard, I would agree that the Republicans will be, they'll stand in line and they'll be loyal and faithful to the president. But I wonder when things hit Canada and Mexico, when it hits closer to home, when there is a more direct impact on American consumers, I wonder if maybe some of that faithfulness will start to be a little less strong.
And that's something that I have kind of been asking a lot of people, especially Republicans we've been speaking to on the show, like Rob Artlett and Angie Wong. I've spoken to them about the midterm elections, and I did say to them, are people willing to endure the pain, but only for how long? So would the midterms be a real significant turning point if this really starts to bite people when they go to the supermarket?
And I think we saw something similar to that with the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. I'm not sure if that was backlash against Musk or if that was because of some of what President Trump is doing. I do think that 18 months from now, if things go south, like some people think that they could, I think it could be I don't think the Republicans would fare very well. And I think that would concern a lot of people.
We're only on day 74. Just to let you know, not even 100 days of Trump yet. But staying with tariffs now, and Canada's response to them, Prime Minister Mark Carney told reporters Canada will act with purpose and with force after Trump slapped a brand new 25% tariff on foreign-made cars. Take a look.
And the U.S. has signaled that there will be additional tariffs in so-called strategic sectors, pharmaceuticals, lumber, and semiconductors. So we're in a situation where there is going to be an impact on the U.S. economy, which will build with time. In our judgment, it will be negative on the U.S. economy. That will have an impact on us. But the series of measures will directly affect millions of Canadians. We are going to fight these tariffs with countermeasures. We are going to protect our workers, and we are going to build the strongest economy in the G7. In a crisis, it's important to come together, and it's essential to act with purpose and with force, and that's what we will do.
And we're lucky enough to have an American and a Canadian in the studio today. So, of course, Michael, as a resident of Canada, what do you make of 25% tariff for your countrymen? And were you expecting more?
So yesterday I was expecting more, and I thought it would be a lot worse. But you have to remember that today Canada will find out more, hopefully there'll be more clarity on the auto tariffs. But you also have to remember that it wasn't too long ago that there were 25% tariffs that were imposed on steel and aluminum. Aluminum for some, aluminum for others. There also is the threat, but it looks like it's probably going to be some sort of tariffs on lumber and pharmaceuticals and on microprocessors. So while that one day Canada did better than expected, I think in the long run we might not fare as well.
Joanne, I just wanted to say, Trump seemed to have a real issue with Canada under Justin Trudeau. Do you think he's been a little bit nicer to Carney?
Well, he hasn't called him Governor of Canada yet, so that's, I think, a good sign. Another thing is that they did have a phone call recently, and they both seemed to have a positive outcome from that conversation. They said it was constructive, it was productive, and so they haven't been, Trump, I guess I would say, he hasn't been really attacking him as much as he was on Trudeau. And soon, I think we'll just have to wait and see how this relationship plays out, really, with time. And then also they're going to meet in person after the elections in Canada, after the Canada elections. So I think we'll see more once that meeting happens and how they are in person together.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, Mark Carney, he's got a great CV. We know that. He was, of course, the governor of the Bank of England, where I had the opportunity to meet him. And he was also the governor of the Bank of Canada. So he's a guy with loads of skin in the game. Do you think President Trump is going to respect him more and maybe be kinder to Canada?
I think he'll respect him more because of the CV, as you said, but also, you know, traditionally Trump has not thought the highest of career politicians. And although Justin Trudeau had been a teacher before he entered politics, I think because he came from a family, his father, of course, had been prime minister, I think that right away that would be something that Trump would not feel a kinship with. And I think with Mark Carney, he sees somebody who's a little bit older. He's going to be 60. And I think he sees somebody who has an established track record, and as you said, an impressive CV. And I think that there is maybe that thinking that he has to be a little bit more conciliatory, at least in the beginning, to see in which direction the relationship's going to go.
So I just wanted to speak to you a little bit. You touched on the election there, Joanne, but for you, do you think Mark Carney's got a good shot at winning this, and how's he doing in the polls?
So the elections will be on the 28th of April, so you have about 3 weeks or so. If elections were held today, he would probably have a majority government, and there's no way that you would have said that a few months ago. I think that he is doing well because he has the advantage that Pierre Poilievre, the leader of Conservatives, and the leader of the NDP do not have, which is that Mark Carney can actually stand up in front of a group of reporters and say, this is what I talked to the president about. And Trump and tariffs are the only issue that are on the Canadian election scene this year. And when he can do that and the others can't, I think that gives him a huge advantage.
So there's been a big US-Canada feud going on, Joanne. We heard about Canadianos coming in. And can you tell me any more about this? What do you think about the two once really close allies now seemingly having this rift?
Well, there's always been a bit of, I wouldn't say competition, but there's always been a bit of sensitivity between Americans and Canadians, right? It's like, oh,
no, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, right? Am I right? Like, there's always like, oh, they're Canadian, oh, they're American.
I don't know.
Maybe it's an American thing. I don't know. It goes back to maybe Americans being in their own bubble and thinking, thinking differently about the rest of the world. But it's just one of those things. I think we'll hear more about those things just for like a little drama, just about the coffee, Americanos now being Canadianos, that kind of thing. It just goes with just the drama that comes with all this.
Yeah, and the 51st state that he kept on touting, of course, Donald Trump, and also the governor's situation. That seems to have all died down now.
I haven't heard that recently.
But, yeah, I didn't realise there was any conflict between America and Canada, but there we are.
I think maybe it could be on the American side, but I'm sure any American would agree that there is a bit of a sensitivity there, just to say other Canadians, other Americans, that kind of thing.
And to all the viewers, we're all friends here.
Yes.
Yes. Indeed. Stay right there for now. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. Hungary has announced its withdrawal from the International Criminal Court. It comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is under an ICC arrest warrant, arrives in Budapest for a state visit. Hungary is a founding member of the ICC, which does consist of 125 member states. Thousands of people in Haiti have taken to the streets to protest against armed gangs. Violent groups have forced over 1 million from their homes, leading to mass hunger and a declining economy. The coalition, known as Viv and Sam, are also accused of extortion, mass rapes and killings. Senior Russia negotiator Kirill Dmitriev has met with the Trump administration in Washington, and the United States continues to push for a Russia-Ukraine ceasefire. Dmitriev is the highest-ranking Russian official to travel to the US on state business since Russia expanded its invasion of Ukraine. And at least 30 people have died as a result of the Los Angeles wildfires, which raged through the region back in January. Authorities gave the update as the remains of another victim were discovered. The fires, which destroyed parts of California, burned for over 3 weeks and forced thousands to evacuate their homes. The death toll from the 7.7 magnitude earthquake that hit Myanmar last Friday has now killed over 3,000 people. In a statement, the military-led government said hundreds more are still missing and nearly 5,000 have been injured. Search and rescue teams say they are scrambling to provide medical aid and shelter for the survivors. Let's hear from some of them.
There is zero possibility of finding survivors. It is the 5th or 6th day after the earthquake, and the weather is extremely hot. So it is not possible for people to stay alive in this situation. We have only recovered bodies so far.
It was an 8-story building, but 5 stories went down into the ground. Only 3 stories remain above ground. We found 3 dead bodies yesterday. Some bodies still remain under the rubble. We have been searching for 4 days since the first day of the earthquake. We searched during the day and overnight. We could smell bodies under the debris. The smell disappears briefly while digging, but returns later. We don't know what will happen in the coming days.
Joanne, horrendous scenes that we're seeing coming out of Myanmar, obviously nearly a week since that earthquake hit. Many countries have sent aid to support the efforts there, but it's complex because of the ongoing civil war in the country.
Yeah, so the civil war has really affected aid being able to deliver aid to different areas. One, access restrictions. So in conflict zones, there's issues with the roads. There's issues with bridges, any kind of transportation, so they can't get aid to the right areas. And then also there's been reports that and concerns that the aid is being distributed to places held by the military junta instead of everywhere that needs the aid. So there's also been those concerns where aid is not reaching those most in need.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, we're also hearing that there could be severe rains coming from Myanmar. And as we know, it's pretty cut off from the rest of the world. And there's concerns of cholera. And what do you think that the world can do right now? Is aid going to be able to get into the countries, and are people going to be able to join forces like the UN and the WHO?
Well, I think one of the surprises has actually been China in this situation. They have not only sent over a lot of personnel, where in the past U.S. Aid would have done that, but they've also donated $14 million for relief efforts, where the U.S. Aid has only donated $2 million. So you already see, with Trump being in power, as you said, only 74 days, you're seeing how things have changed in a situation like this, where in the past the U.S. was there before anybody else. U.S. rescuers are hung up right now at various border crossings because they're waiting for visas to be sorted out. So while we are optimistic that things will hopefully improve in the short term, I think things will change in the long term because of the way things have happened, have shifted in U.S. politics.
And also, Joanne, we've seen so many sad scenes, family members waiting for days because there's just no machinery to help these people right now. But incredibly, some survivors are still being pulled from the rubble.
Yeah, there's actually one survivor recently. He was pulled after being under the rubble for nearly 125 hours. He was alive. Obviously, he needed a lot of medical care, so he is in the hospital now being treated, but he's one of the stories of survival.
Yeah, and we're just looking at those pictures now. Pretty incredible. But of course, Bangkok, Michael, also felt the effects of this. And I think it was so many aftershocks that caused so much problem.
And that's usually the case. I lived in Japan for many years where you would have earthquakes almost on a weekly basis. And the big one is not, you being from California, you would know, the big one is not the big one, it's the aftershocks. Those are where people will sometimes go to help, and there will be buildings that will be almost falling, and then with the aftershocks, they will fall. So it's an ongoing situation that I think is incredibly dangerous for everybody that's involved, of course. But I do think that the aftershocks that were felt in Thailand have proven to be not as bad as, of course, the big one. But in this particular case, they still have to continue to be really careful.
Yeah, very sad scenes. Thank you. Well, stay right there, Joanne and Michael. We'll be back with you in just a moment's time. Let's take a look at the top business news now. Oil prices fell by over 3% on Thursday as a reaction to President Trump's tariff announcement. Investors are concerned a global trade war will affect economic growth and limit fuel demand. Brent futures were down $2.66 to $72.29 a barrel, and that was earlier today. Similarly, US crypto stocks fell in pre-market trading on Thursday. Investor confidence has been rattled due to increasing trade tensions, prompting a sell-off in the riskier assets. Crypto exchange Coinbase Global fell 4%, while major Bitcoin holder Strategy dropped 3%. Turning to all the sports news now, and Fenerbahce boss Jose Mourinho has been accused of physically attacking the manager Okan Burak after he appeared to grab his nose following their team's clash in the Turkish Cup. Mourinho approached Okan Burak from behind and appeared to pinch his nose. Borak then fell and covered his face with his hands. It took place when both managers were speaking with match officials after the very final whistle. And the British tennis player Emma Raducanu has pulled out of next week's Billie Jean King Cup qualifiers in the Netherlands to look after her body. The UK number 2 reached the Miami Open quarter-finals last week. The 22-year-old has competed in 7 tournaments so far this year, the most she's played in the first 3 months of a season. Severe storms causing tornadoes and floodings have hit areas of America's South and Midwest, leaving at least 2 people dead. It comes on the back of a recent spate of powerful storms across the country, but the National Weather Service warns there's now the threat of multi-day catastrophic and potentially historic rainfall event. Al Arabia's news correspondent Sarah Firth has more on this developing story.
The terrifying moment capturing a tornado on the ground in Mississippi, heading towards Tennessee overnight. Residents in some of the towns along the storm path urged to take shelter immediately. At least 19 tornadoes struck Wednesday night as storms ripped through areas from Texas to Michigan, killing at least 2 people. Today, the National Weather Service warning of generational floods in the US South and Midwest. This was the aftermath of recent storm damage in Alabama. And in Mississippi, recent storms left a trail of damage, with homes destroyed and trees uprooted. Today, are Kansas, Missouri, Tennessee and Mississippi all on severe storm warnings. Some of these areas have already declared a state of emergency. Homes destroyed, cars submerged. These areas in America's South and Midwest, not unused to extreme weather, but with many still picking up the pieces of damage caused by recent storms, the warning now is stark, that the worst could still be yet to come. Sarah Firth, Al Arabiya News, Washington.
So, Joanne, you've actually lived in California. Luckily, you've never experienced a US tornado, is that correct?
Yes, so no tornadoes in California, but we grew up hearing about tornadoes, seeing what happens in other parts of the country on TV and on the news. But every area, I feel, in the US has its own natural disasters. In California, we have the wildfires, for example, or earthquakes in some parts of California. And that is something that we just have to deal with because it depends on where we live.
Yeah, absolutely. But Michael, your house in Florida was affected by Hurricane Milton. What can you tell us about that experience?
So as a Canadian owning in America, some might think that I'm a traitor, but we bought it many years ago. It's 90 seconds away from the beach. It's in a small town called Treasure Island. And when Hurricane Milton hit last year, it was rendered uninhabitable. There was sand. It became an indoor swimming pool. There were pictures that neighbors had taken where the water came up to about 4 feet high. So now we're waiting for FEMA and for the insurance company to decide how much we'll get. But what's interesting for the tornado talk is that the moisture that affected this particular weather in what's called the tornado alley in the States also came from the Gulf. And tornadoes are so much more common than hurricanes, but the amount of destruction that they can produce, I think if you're looking at photographs from the aftermath, a hurricane, it might look like it's a little bit soggy, but you can see with tornadoes, roofs are just getting ripped off, and you can see, people's lives destroyed. It seems so much more dramatically than just about any other natural disaster.
Yeah, we're just having a look and we can see some pictures on the screen that you've sent us of your house. And it is really difficult, isn't it, to see that destruction, and where do you start repairing it, really?
For us, if I can speak personally for a moment, it was just a year before we had shipped all our household items, the stuff that we had gathered over 34 years of marriage and 2 grown children. We just shipped all that stuff from the UAE to Florida. And of course, a year later, the storm hit and it was all ruined. And it was a Category 5 storm, which meant that there was sewage backing up. So anything that was touched by any of the water had to be thrown away. So you had workmen who came in and threw out all your furniture, all your personal belongings. It didn't matter. So probably 80% of what we would have considered personal keepsakes were destroyed.
Yeah, of course. And we were speaking earlier, I was saying I've never been in anything, but I can remember the Dubai floods. I know it's nothing like that, but it was very traumatic and it was quite scary. And I remember the water almost coming up into my house.
I remember our car flooded in the parking garage under the building, and I think it was maybe 4 or 5 feet of water inside the building, inside the garage, and then also in the ground floor of the building. And we had to walk out as a family through water that was knee-high to get to the main road, to be able to catch a ride, to get out of the area. There's no way out other than walking through the water. That was traumatizing to have to go through that, and like with a little kid and all that. And it was something that I hope we never have to experience again. And I hope no one has to experience that at all.
Yeah, because I've never been through anything like that, and I was in this same situation. But I always think nature has a way of winning in lots of different aspects of life. And finally, we've reached this point in the show that Joanne and Michael have come up with a couple of very quirky stories of the day, and they're going to tell us about it. So, Michael, tell us about the escaped otter.
So actually, it was two American river otters escaped from a zoo in Wisconsin, in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And what was interesting is that whenever you have, I think, wildlife, and then they are given names, it elevates their story. So you had Ophelia and you had Louis. Now, Ophelia was captured about a week afterwards. Louis, however, is still on the run. And it is otter mating season. So the thinking is that perhaps Louis is going to be gone a little bit longer, and hopefully he'll have a safe return, just like Ophelia.
Maybe he's having a look for a different girlfriend for a little while if it's mating season. And Joanne, you got a really interesting story about some family ashes. Let's just watch it first. Oh, we were meant to see the clip, but it doesn't seem to be happening.
Technical difficulties.
We'll show the clip eventually. But tell us the story.
So this mom of a toddler, she left her child for, I think, seconds or less than 2 minutes. She goes upstairs to do something with the laundry. She comes back and she finds him in his grandfather's ashes. Spread, you can see it in the clip, spread all over the couch and on his face, meaning he was definitely eating it. So she was mortified. You can hear her voice in the video. I was trying to see if she was in the middle between like laughing and crying, because toddlers just do the craziest things, and sometimes you want to be so mad at them, but also you want to laugh because it's just hilarious. Good thing the boy's okay. She did get him checked out. Doctor said he'll be fine. They just told her to have him drink water, and I guess it'll just flush out of his system. But yeah. It went viral on TikTok, and people had a lot to say in the comments.
I was really distressed when I first watched it, I'm not going to lie. But I don't know, Michael, people do a lot of things with ashes. We were talking about this earlier. What kind of insights do you have into this?
So the first one that came to my mind was many years ago, Keith Richards announcing that he had snorted some of his father's ashes. Mm-hmm. And I think that others can make jewelry. They can use it as actually almost like henna, where they have tattoos. The ashes are used and they're tattooed into the person. So if you want that loved one to stay with you forever, there are ways to make sure that it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were just talking about strange things we ate as children, and I remember eating all the dog biscuits. I got to confess, because it used to drive my mum wild. And you've got a little boy. What strange things has he been eating?
I mean, sand at the beach, that was one of the first things, but I think that's just normal. He wants to try the texture. Today, he drove me crazy because he dropped his snacks on the floor in the parking garage where, everyone walks and all the cars. Yeah. And he had a tantrum because I wouldn't let him eat it off the floor.
2-second rule.
Yeah, no, no, not in the parking garage.
And your children, when they were young, anything?
So my kids are 28 now. They live in North America. I think that when they were younger, I think the craziest thing would probably be pineapple on pizza.
Oh, well, I love pineapple on pizza.
Right.
It's honestly one of my favourite things. I don't think that's crazy.
But you ate dog biscuits.
No, but the dog, can I tell you something? Dog biscuits were better than the pineapple on pizza. But I don't think that's too crazy, actually. I'm with the pineapple on the pizza.
Not for me.
Well, thank you so much for those quirky stories. They were absolutely brilliant. And we do hope that the otter, Louis, is returned very soon. Thank you very much. Here's a reminder of our top stories. The world responds to Trump's long-awaited tariffs. Canadians fight back. Mark Carney announces a 25% tax on imported US vehicles. And at least 6 people are dead and over 200,000 without power after tornadoes rage across the US. And that's all from us on W News Extra. G&T with Tom Burgess-Watson is coming up next, followed by a special interview with Hadley Gamble. Good night, and I just want to say thank you very much to my guests who joined me on the show.